every Resident Evil on the RTX 4060. We got Resident Evil Remake Remaster HD, 0, 2 Remake, 2, 3 Remake, 4 Remake, 4 with the HD project, 5, 6, 7 Revelations, Revelations 2, and Village. I'm going to be testing also the originals once all of them come out on GOG. But as of right now, let's do the entire franchise, excluding those first ones that were on PlayStation 1. All mods and fixes used are in the description as well, so let's get into it. We start with the remaster of the remake that came out on GameCube a while back. I added some texture mods that were upscaled using AI. It actually looks pretty good like that. And I had to edit a config file in order to get 4K, but clearly the 3D models are not being rendered at 4K. I can see the aliasing around GL. Everything that is actually a 3D model is actually... yeah, it has those alias edges. It's pretty clear that the game is rendering internally at a lower resolution than 4K, but the upscale textures actually look pretty good. And the game runs, obviously, completely solidly at like 120. That's the limitation of the engine itself. You can go above 120 editing some of the memory. And by some of the memory, I mean you can do some memory editing with cheat engine or something like that to unlock it. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it just because it might F up some of the scripted sequences of the game. So not much to say about this one. I highly recommend the mod for those textures, especially if you're playing on a big screen. And by big screen, I mean a high resolution screen like this one. Makes the game look way better. So yeah, no problems here. Let's jump into the next one. For Resident Evil 0, we actually got actual 4K from the menu, although the textures look a little bit pixelated, especially the background in this menu. But we got 4K over here from the menu itself, which is a huge improvement over RE Remake Remaster. Pretty much like in the previous Resident Evil game that I showed you, this one also needs a texture change, at least in my opinion. A texture upscaling thing. The FMVs are super low resolution, which is no surprise, much older game. But you can play it at basically 120, no problem whatsoever. I mean, the GPU is not even breaking a sweat, so if you're playing on 1080p, well, you'll still be at 120, same with 1440p. 4K is just flexing at this point on this card. So what I would do on this one is download a mod for textures because they look a little bit low res. Better than on the Remake Remaster, in my opinion. Also the 3D models appear to be rendering at a higher resolution. That's good. So not much to say about this one really. Runs completely fine as expected. Resident Evil 2 Remake, one of the best ones in my opinion. Ray tracing disabled. No FSR, we're at 4K, and these are the settings, so you can look at them very quickly, pause the video. And I also installed the DLSS mod, so we are at 4K, DLSS quality, looks way better than what the engine offers natively, so there are links in the description for this mod. But you can also do 1440p with DLAA if you wanted to. So what would 4K with DLSS quality be? Internally it's 1440p basically, and it looks insanely sharp. I mean, you're missing out if you don't have this mod installed. And as you can see, performance, again, we're playing at 4K with DLSS modded in. Super sharp, looks amazing, at least in my opinion. And this is a 4060, guys. If you're playing 1440p, just select DLAA, and you'll basically have like 100 FPS. So high refresh rate monitors on this card at 1440p will work just fine. which is pretty impressive in my opinion, considering the visuals. We're at the DX12 version. which is the one that has ray tracing. I recommend avoiding ray tracing. It's pretty subtle on this one and the performance hit is large, so that's my advice for Resident Evil 2 Remake. But again, using the DLSS mod, the quality, the edges is unreal. It blows my mind how good this game can look with this mod, especially in a card like this. It's a 4060 at the end of the day, so yeah. If you have this card, you probably don't have a 4K screen, probably 1440p. So I would use 1440p with DLAA. Let's jump into the next one. For Resident Evil 3 Remake, we got 4K like in Resident Evil 2. These are the settings, just please pause the video if you want to see them, just to not waste any more time. These are the settings. Maximum shadows, in my opinion, unnecessary, but they should keep you the best visuals while getting the best performance, very small impact. Then when it comes to the upscaling mod, DLSS quality, like in Resident Evil 2 Remake. And well, what to say, 4K with this quality DLSS option, we basically get 100 FPS, the 90s, basically. So yeah, the game looks great like this. Internally, we're doing 1440p with the DLSS option on quality. So if you have a 1440p screen even, you put the game at 1440p with DLAA, that is basically DLSS applied to the native resolution, and you get 100 FPS as well. So as you can see, very well optimized. On the VRAM side, we're fine as well. So yeah, you can even do 4K, but again, use the mod that I provided in the description to be able to use upscaling, because it looks way sharper than the in-game solution. I mean, it looks like a completely different game now, in a good way. So yeah, there's no reason not to use this tool, at least in my opinion. It looks fantastic, and we're playing at 4K on a 4060. Imagine that. Let me see if I can dodge this enemy. There we go. And I'll shoot this. Boom. Let's jump into the next one. Resident Evil 4 with the HD project. So this is the original RE4, but we got a huge mod that improves the graphics quite significantly and fixes some bugs. 4K, 2x MSIA, still overkill, but hey. And this includes all these options as well that I recommend you enable, most of them. Some of these are pretty useful, some others not so much, but I love that I'm able to include FOV, additional FOV. That's pretty cool. At 20, I think it looks good enough, so that's what I think. You hit on save, and the game looks fantastic. There is a link for this mod in the description. So with this mod, you cannot unlock the frame rate, unfortunately, but I think for this one, 60 frames is good enough. It's an engine game limitation, but it's completely fine. The GPU is barely being utilized. And visually, the person that made this mod, Gigabyte, spent a lot of years remaking everything, and now we got it. That's fantastic. Cannot praise him enough. That guy knows what he was doing. So yeah, on the 4060, if you do 1440p, you'll still be with the 60 FPS target, which I think, again, resolution on this one is not an issue, and with this mod, it really does feel like a new game. But a new game in a way that they put so much care into being faithful to the original that it feels like a version that Capcom could have released if they cared. So great job. Super impressed as always on this one. Can't believe that it took so many years to make this mod. Labor of love. Wish me luck against the chainsaw guy. Agárrenlo. Come on, there you go. With these 2 items. But she always gets me. So yeah, highly recommended. Let's jump into the next one. Resident Evil 5, 4K, a crazy 4x MSIA, and the highest settings. And this is personally one of my favorite Resident Evil games. The co-op factor here, at least in my opinion, is great. So for that alone, I highly recommend it. It's the least Resident Evil of all of them, in some ways. Because I focus on action more than anything. But I think they did a great job, especially with the fire effects and the explosions. But I played this game so many times. I mean, this level, I don't know how many hours I have, but I played this on PS3, on Switch, on Steam Deck. I played on basically everything already. On the Switch, it was more of a 30 to 20 FPS game, at least for me. With some overclocking, I was able to do 40s, but still. This game is fantastic, at least in my opinion. Pretty addictive. And as you can see, even with 4x MSIA at 4K, we're still getting half the GPU being utilized. The GPU is laughing at this game. And it's locked to 120. We can go above that with cheat engine adjustment, editing the memory and all that, but some of the scripted sequences might break. So I recommend staying at 120 and don't bother doing anything else. So yeah, works just fine as expected, and you can do even 4K at 120 if you wanted to. The GPU just laughs at the game. Everyone's favorite, Resident Evil 6, highest settings, 4K. Let's get into it. As usual, I'm doing Chris's campaign, since at least for me it was the most demanding. And it works pretty well. Not really a surprise. I mean, it's 120, the GPU is laughing at the game right now. Not hard to run at all, unsurprisingly. Unlike on... what's the name of this? Like on Resident Evil 5, we are locked at 120. Engine limitation, I'm guessing. You can also unlock it using cheat engine, but I wouldn't recommend it. Just to make sure that the game works properly. But this one, a non-issue. Completely fine. That's expected, so you can do 4K 120 without even trying. The GPU doesn't even know that it's running a video game. And in my opinion, it still looks okay, all things considered. The higher resolution really benefits the game quite a bit. That's awesome. Well, that's about it. If you wanted to revisit RE6, I think this is the best way to do it. At 4K at 120, and if you have a 1440p screen, your PC is not even going to notice that it's going to play a game, basically, so that's RE6, everyone's favorite. For Resident Evil 7, we're also doing 4K, but we lowered the texture quality from very high to high. This game loves VRAM, so keep that in mind. I also lowered the shadow quality a little bit to have less VRAM usage, and we are on the sRGB color space. And while on this one I tried to enable the DLSS mod, I had a lot of performance issues for some reason. The frame times were all over the place. Not sure if the mod wasn't hooking correctly, but there you go. Cover your eyes for this part. Alright. I'm gonna kill every one of you. Let's go. But as you can see, the VRAM is already maxed out. This game was pretty infamous for that. But as you can see at 4K, we're basically above 60. If you're at 1440p native, you're also going to be probably above 100 FPS at 1440p, so for most people this will be like the 100 FPS game. So yeah, this is more of a 4K game, 1440p game, without using the upscaling. Personally, I didn't use the DX12 version because that one, at least for me, I had issues with the visuals, especially reflections, and the ray tracing, in my opinion, is not worth investing time into. I mean, the ray tracing is pretty subtle on this one, at least in my opinion. So do 1440p or 4K. 4K works pretty well, but again, most of you probably have a 1440p screen, so all up to you. But it's pretty nuts to see this running so well. Since I played it on day one, well, it ran well back then, but looking at it now, it's kind of mind-blowing how far we come. So let's jump into the next one now. Surprise, mother fluffer. Resident Evil Revelations 1 unfortunately is capped to 1600p, so we're doing 1440p. And basically the highest settings. And here we go, Resident Evil Revelations 1. It was originally a Nintendo 3DS game, so it was obviously going to run fine. I wish we could actually do 4K on this one. There's maybe a mod to do so. But when I tried 4K, the game basically crashed every single time. Maybe a DX9 limitation, not entirely sure. But even if we were playing at 4K, we'll be at half GPU usage. I mean, the GPU is absolutely doing nothing, which is fine, I get it. But still, I think it's pretty funny. It's such an easy to run game. I mean, again, obviously, since it was a Nintendo 3DS game originally, then released for the HD consoles at the time, PlayStation 3, 360, all that, it was going to run well, but this is laughably easy to run, obviously. I just wish there was 4K support on this one. Resident Evil Revelations 2, 4K, basically the highest settings, obviously, and this one is also locked at 120, as far as I remember. So same engine as Resident Evil 5 and all that, and Resident Evil 6. But this one, funnily enough, it never came to 3DS. It was always a current gen, I think it was a PlayStation 3 game as well. It was an episodic thing. Now you can get all the episodes for super cheap, which I would recommend. It's a very fun game. But there are some places, especially when there's a lot of foliage, when the game lags dropping below 100 FPS. But this is yet another one that is super easy to run, at least on PC. The GPU is basically doing nothing. Although the game loves to use one core, especially in bigger areas. And this is one of those areas that I was talking about. When you play as Barry, there's a lot of vegetation. As you can see, bigger maps. There might be drops below 100. Depending on your CPU, loves to use one core. But otherwise, it's completely fine. Very easy to run game in general.
She does have a good heart.
You have a lot of popping here. There was also, now that I remember, a PS Vita version that runs like absolute dog shit. Even worse than the Switch, obviously. But the game itself, I really enjoyed it. Felt a little bit weird to control, but once you get used to it, it's a pretty fun experience. I like it more than Resident Evil 6, but I guess that's not a very high bar to surpass. And it runs pretty well. I mean, we are at 4K 120, the GPU is close to 70%. In the bad parts, probably 80% usage. But the game is super easy to run as well. And if you're a 1440p user, well, 1440p 120 basically across the board. So yeah, nothing to worry about. Completely fine. And if you can get all the chapters in a single package, please do. I think it's a good experience. Just make sure that you just don't get episode 1 when you're purchasing it. If you want the whole package, you get the deluxe edition. Anyway, that's for this one. Let's go into the next one. Resident Evil Village 4K once more. We're using the DLSS mod as well. Again, all of that is in the description. These are the settings, no ray tracing, just personal preference. I think it's a little bit too subtle in this game. So that's basically the settings. And when it comes to DLSS. You might not be able to see it, but it says DLSS quality. So internally, we're actually rendering this at 1440p. And in this part that has lots of foliage, which is where I drop frames the most, it's basically over 80 FPS across the board. It's completely fine. So if you're doing 1440p, even without DLSS, you're going to have over 100 FPS, like similar to Resident Evil 2 Remake. It runs a bit worse than that, and I'm playing in third person because that's an option using the DLC. So yeah, they put the third person mode as DLC, thanks Capcom. If you're playing first person, it should run a little bit better. But personally, I think, at least for me, first person in this game made me sick. I mean, the visual movement is just too... It's like a fisheye effect. Worse than in Resident Evil 7. So again, for this one, I highly recommend you just play in third person if you have the expansion or just the mod. And a mild spoiler, here's one of the factories later on in the game. I think this is like 5 hours in. And it runs better than outside, obviously, because now we have a roof and we don't have to render distant detail. One thing that I do notice with this DLSS mod is that the UI is a little bit blurry. But if you're at 4K or 1440p, shouldn't be an issue. The thing is, when you go below 1080p, that's when the mod for upscaling actually doesn't look good, at least in my opinion. So the lower the pixel count, the worse the upscaling will look, obviously, but it also affects the UI, because this is not official, this is just a mod. So yeah, we're completely fine on this one. I would say if you have this card, you're probably a 1440p person or a 1080p person, so this game will be easily over 100 FPS. Unless you're playing at 4K, which, again, probably not everyone, but some people might. I don't know. Just to let you know that this is 4K with quality DLSS. Visually spectacular. Almost no jaggies, I would say. So if you have a chance to play it, I highly recommend you do it. But third person, in my opinion, is the way to go. Despite the animations looking a bit wonky, because this game was obviously made with first person in mind. Let's jump into the next one. And finally, Resident Evil 4 Remake, 1440p, targeting, well, 60s or higher. And these are basically the settings. You can pause the video if you want to look at them more closely. You can also disable screen space reflections if you want to. They're a little bit annoying sometimes when it comes to visuals. And I also installed the DLSS mod with quality DLSS, so 1440p quality DLSS. You can also use DLAA if you want a higher pixel count. I think quality on DLSS at 1440p looks more than fine. So I'm testing this part that we're playing as Ada in separate ways. I'm doing this on purpose because this specific part with all the rain, the fireplace there that casts shadows, this is where I got the most FPS drops personally. So I'm doing this on purpose. And using the scope also drops frames, but we stay above 60 at 1440p with DLSS quality. And let's heal. I'm playing on professional, sorry. So yeah, this part should be the most demanding one, at least as far as I could test the game, which was a lot. I played the game multiple times, and this part is where I had the most issues. We're going to jump into Leon's part in a moment. But at the start here, at the Ada demanding part, we're completely fine. basically above 60 at all times with DLSS at 1440p. Again, DLSS quality looks fantastic, way better than the FSR2 that the game offers. Visually, completely fantastic. So I think it's time to jump into the Leon part, and always using the scope will drop your frames. Now it's time for Leon at the very beginning of the game. As you can see, much better than the Ada part when it comes to performance, because it's daytime, we don't have those light sources like fire to cast huge shadows, but there will be, of course, I was going to fall for it, but there will be a lot of enemies on screen in a moment, so allow me a second to get to the village. But as you can see, it's completely fine at 1440p with DLSS. Even without it, you should be good, but the game looks blurry without this mod. The TAA in this game is just too soft. You probably saw multiple videos on this on the internet. But nowadays I cannot play without that mod, in my opinion. It's so much blurrier. It's ridiculous. And even with more enemies on screen, as you can probably notice, we're still good. So yeah, this is how I recommend playing the game. Otherwise, use 4K with performance DLSS. You'll be above 60 as well. But as I said in the previous games that ran significantly better than this one, I'm doing mostly 1440p due to the fact that most people that have this card probably have 1440p screens. But on the other ones I did 4K because we had so much room to spare. It was kind of a waste to do 1440p on those. Even on Resident Evil 2 Remake, that one runs so well at 4K. I think 1440p on that one was kind of a, how to say it, an insult. So again, if you have a 1440p screen, you should be good on this card on basically all the RE Engine games. If you want to do 4K, that's also an option. I'm happy to report. Let's just try not to get killed by the chainsaw guy. But in the meantime, what do I think about the RE franchise on the 4060? I'm pretty surprised on how many of the games we can actually play at 4K, all things considered. I wasn't expecting it to run so well when it comes to especially the Remake, 2 Remake, 3 Remake, the 4th, Village. Those can actually be run at 4K as well. But overall, again, I consider this more of a 1440p card. You can do forced 4K on a 1440p screen for less pixelation. So basically super sampling. But I mean, these games run so well. If you have a 144Hz 1440p panel, you'll be more than happy with this. At least in my opinion. Very low GPU usage in general. The newer games, you can run them at a very high frame rate anyway. And if you want to do 4K, that's also an option. But please, for the love of God, in the RE Engine games, except in Resident Evil 7, use the DLSS mod. It makes a huge difference. Again, it's all those mods are in the description. But it looks completely different. The sharpness difference is absolutely insane. There's no reason not to use it, in my opinion. The in-game solution is just way too soft. That's it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to see any other franchise on this card, please let me know. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see ya next time. Bye guys. Let me know your favorite Resident Evil game in the comments below. I don't know, I'm not shooting the cow. Why would I do that?